So hello and welcome to a series of interviews, really getting behind the scenes, trying to understand sports business. I'm Matthew Leighton, and every week we're presenting you with a fascinating Swiss individual who talks about their business and their passion. So follow our journey, and today we're talking with Martin LUGINBUHL, who is a polo player, but also a banker, and also the president of the Swiss Polo Association. So, hello, Martin.
Good morning.
So, let's talk business. Martin LUGINBUHL, tell me something about the history of polo in Switzerland.
Sure. So polo started in about 85 in Switzerland with the Swiss Polo Association that was founded then. And the first big competition that took place in Switzerland was Samoritz. So Samoritz World Snow Polo. And as a matter of fact, then my father, Yves, started his club here in Geneva, which is called Polo Club de VT. That was in 88. So that's when all started. And then little by little, other clubs were set up. One in Zurich, Polo Park Zurich. And now we have about 10 clubs in total. So, a positive evolution and quite a busy activity considering the size of the country.
When you are placed in a job, it's always good to have the credibility. You're now the president of the Swiss Polo Association, but give me some credibility. What's your family's link with polo?
So it's quite a long story, but to cut it short, our father, who is originally a farmer, turned his farm into a polo club, again in about 88. That was after a trip to Argentina. And sorry, this is for you.
Thank you
that
very
was
much.
After a trip to Argentina, where he had to take care of a farm there. And he was looking for horses in general because he was a rider himself, and our grandfather was a rider as well. And that's when he discovered polo horses. And he literally fell in love with polo ponies, which were, so easy, so docile, and really well trained. And he said, okay, why don't I bring a couple to Switzerland and start playing with friends just for fun? And some existing players showed up, namely some bankers from Geneva. And they said, Yves, are you starting a club? Sorry, are you creating something new? And he was, okay, I haven't thought about it, but we could discuss. And that's how it started. Really more professional activity. Then he brought in some professionals from Argentina, and that's how the club started. And so I was lucky to be raised in that atmosphere, in contact with horses and players, and also to travel a little bit and play around Europe and also Argentina. And so I decided to keep that passion next to my job, which is a bit different. It's an office job, working at UBS for the sponsorship department, specializing on Formula One.
Right.
So also about speed and about horsepower, we could say.
So, business side, now you have a very demanding job. You're president of the Swiss Association. How does that work, and why have you decided to become president of the Swiss Association?
I didn't really look for that at the time, so we're talking about September 2016, yes, when the presidency of the association, which is a 2-year term, was coming to an end, and the former president, who had been in place for, I think, about 8 years, Thomas Fédier from Zurich, he wanted to retire. And so they were looking for someone new. And the Polo Park Zurich, the club over there, they reached out to me and said, Martin, we think you are first a confirmed player, then you're working in the sports business, you know all the clubs already, you have good relationships with them, why don't you become the next president? And I thought, I'm way too young for that, probably. We need someone with more experience and maybe also more neutral in a way, because someone who has the outside view. And they said, no, we actually need the opposite. We need an insider. We need someone who knows everyone. And I said, okay, let's give it a try. And I put my dossier on the table and was elected with, I think, 2 or 3 voices more than, of course, the other opponent. And since then, it's been probably 10 to 15% of my time, so free time, that's been dedicated to that. And yeah, quite a little bit of juggling, to manage all this, but a very interesting adventure, I must say. And
let's dig into this adventure. So, as a Formula One business person, there's millions and trillions of francs out there. How do you put that experience, and how are you trying to grow the Swiss Polo Association?
Obviously, it's a very small association, and it's still very amateur because we have a treasurer, we have a secretary, myself, and then we have a board, but everyone is doing that on their free time. So, of course, you can't expect the same level as, the US Polo Association, who have millions in turnover and who have a dedicated staff all year long. So we're trying to do the best with what we have, and we need to focus for that. And so we have set ourselves with, various priorities, but to name the three most important ones, it would be the youth. How do we make sure that we have continuity in the next generations? It would be communication in general. So how do we best position ourselves within the sport landscape in Switzerland? And the third one would be, about really thinking long term and the vision. Okay, where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? Do we want to be more professional? Do we want to keep it as a friendly sort of, family community? And I've been working on these 3 points with our staff, so to speak. And hopefully, if this presidency is re-elected now in October, we will continue working on that.
So go into a little bit more detail, always financially, you can give us figures if you'd like to. What did you find when you came in? Where are you now? And where would you like to be? And perhaps you...
Thank you. So, I think what I found out, and to give a comparison with Formula One, which is obviously now of big influence to me, Polo has a great commercialization or commercial potential, let's say, which has not been really tapped into. Look at experiences like garage tours in Formula One, where you can go and see the cars from really close. Look at what they call the pit link, which is for guests on site. You have a camera that it's streaming live the action from the garage, and you can look at what happens there. So they try to immerse the viewer or the guest in every experience that the drivers go through, and they try to make that accessible to the mass as well, which I think is great. In Polo, you go to a game, you watch the game, you see what's happening on the field, but you don't really access the backstage. And I think that's an important element. And it's only one example among many possibilities to make the sport a little bit also more attractive to the media and therefore then to the masses. So that's one learning. And then the other learning is that, like everything, you have to invest time to get the output, right? And I think we will need to become more professional as an association at some point, but that can only be possible and enabled with revenue, right? So I would say these are two things that we're trying to work on now.
At the moment, as far as I can see it, you have a few super top brands that are involved in this sport. How do you make sure that you don't put their noses out by perhaps bringing in more brands? Are you going for the same level, or will you accept anyone if you're looking to have more money in the sport?
I think that's a very good point. And you need a variety of levels of sponsorship, I would say. So, to give you again an example, now we're full gas on the Gégère Le Cool Polo Masters here in Vete. And, to have such a name, such a watch brand sponsoring the whole event is great. But of course, you need to diversify a little bit your pool of sponsors, and you also need smaller partners, maybe with whom you have barter deals, not necessarily, with financial transactions. And that's the same for the association. So now we're working hard on, creating a very clear and impactful package for these sponsors. May they be, big brands or smaller brands, maybe even SMEs, that are willing to target a very niche audience, very qualitative audience, of course, high profile, but with maybe less means than, again, a big brand from the Richemont Group, for example.
Tell me how you do that.
That's very difficult. I think there's a part of bouche à oreille, how do you say?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, exactly. Where basically you have to be present at certain events or certain opportunities to mingle and network with people. So that's face-to-face, old school marketing, basically.
Okay.
And then there's a more formal way to do it, where you basically look at companies that are present in certain regions of Switzerland, and say you're a up and coming luxury brand from Zurich, then it might make sense for you to contact or being introduced to Polo Park Zurich, who's also on the rise in terms of evolution, and maybe sponsor a tournament, because you would be surprised by the amounts of money. It's not really a lot, but the quality of contacts you get is tremendous, and you can really follow up after that on with whatever newsletters, with inviting those guests from the event to dedicated events within the city, maybe more in a store context. So I think there's a need for also education for the clubs on how sponsorship works and how you have to follow up on these leads and how you have to convert those, right?
Social media. How do you get involved? And because it's a very image-conscious sport, are you throwing pictures everywhere, or what's your tactic to attract people?
We've done a test so far for social media with the Swiss Polo Association, which consists mostly of organic posts, so not via targeted paid campaigns. That's the next step. We wanted to have our new website ready for that, which will be the case next month.
Okay.
To start, with more strategic measures. But so far, we've seen very high engagement, because what you realize is that the polo community, although small, is very much in contact with each other, meaning there's a constant dialogue, and anything you would post that is, of course, it has to be relevant and it has to tell a story, will generate high engagement from the community. So I'm looking forward to seeing how, or if this is reflected through strategic paid campaigns, but you have to be on social media for sure, because it allows for consideration. You want people to consider polo, to think, okay, it's maybe not that sport I was thinking about from, Pretty Woman,
okay.
Which is completely inaccessible. It might be as accessible than jumping or dressage. And that's really what we want to trigger. And then obviously our job as the association is then to redirect those leads or this traffic towards the clubs. So if you live again in Nyon or Geneva, you might want to consider VT. If you're living in Zurich, then Polo Park Zurich, Zug or Legacy. So that's our job, really.
Let's switch subjects. The horses, the ponies, which we all call them two names. How does that part of the business, how is that developing?
I would say the model has evolved to a small extent, meaning that before you used to have only Argentine horses that were imported, okay, and that were then sold in Switzerland. Now the sourcing has varied a little bit. So it's not only directly from Argentina, but you have thoroughbreds from France who are running, but maybe not running fast enough, who are then reconverted into polo horses. You also have, some horses from even Australia, New Zealand, locally also bred in England sometimes. So there's been some diversification in terms of the sourcing. There's no breeding program of polo horses in Switzerland that is lucrative, really. So there's, as an example, the family here in Polo Club de VT does it, but it's out of passion. Okay. If you would look at the amount that you would have to pay to cover the expenses of one of these horses after 2 years, you would go really mad. Okay. So there's no breeding program as such, but it's a huge business. The top professionals, if you look at their income, it's usually split between their salary, so that what they get from their patrons by playing with them, a bit like mercenaries almost. Then it's, if they're really good, sponsorship. They would get some help from big brands, and then it's the horse sales. The horse sales is, I could risk myself at some figures. It would probably represent 50% of their revenues, because they will, breed these horses in Argentina, take them to a certain level, sell them to wealthy, European, Asian, American players, and the margin would be really high. So it's good business for them.
And on to the most important point, I suppose, is the conviviality and the fact that it's a brilliant sport to network and have business opportunities. How does that work?
Absolutely.
Talking about hair.
I think what I really like about polo is that it mixes really two groups, and you would be surprised how they go well together. So on one hand, grooms, so the ones taking care of the horses, most probably coming from Argentina, modest background. And then on the other end of the scope, high profile individuals, CEO of companies, successful entrepreneurs, and they blend really well together. And you spend a lot of time during tournaments like that. And Mate is a very good example, because you would share that with that group, and that would work really well and give unique opportunities also for people who want to network.
Perfect. Well, enjoy your non-alcoholic Mate.
Yes.
And we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.